maybe some of you didn't get gluten, but we get this every year. It's one of our top questions. You know, I went and ate at my family members. I ate OPF, right, other people's food. Now I've gotten glutened. What do I do? How can I feel better quickly? So we're going to dive into some detox strategies around overcoming how to basically how to get better after getting gluten. So stick with me. But I think more importantly, we're going to talk about some of the psychology. So one of the things I want you all to understand is it's a normal, natural progress or process rather when you're going gluten-free to challenge the whole status. So what do I mean by that? A lot of people go gluten-free. They feel better. Then they go to a relative's house, or that, you know, they break down over a holiday and they eat gluten on purpose. That can be very normal for many of you. Now, some people watching may have gone gluten-free and it was cold turkey and never went back, never looked back. That wasn't me. I challenge everything. So I certainly, when I went gluten-free almost 20 years ago, I challenged the premise and reintroduced it and paid a price, as most people do. But I think for many of you, it's important to understand that going gluten-free and then challenging that premise and getting gluten hammered, if you will, is, for most people, it's part of their learning curve. It's part of what helps them to mature into understanding that the diet is actually the right move. And that with that being in mind, it's a lot easier to fully commit when you've had experiences that were negative after, you know, deviating from the diet. So some of you maybe are just getting your copy of No Grain, No Pain. Some of you may have just found, you know, this channel and you're like, what is he talking about? I haven't gone gluten-free yet. So remember this conversation and bookmark this video and come back to it, you know, when you get to that level or that position in your gluten-free diet. I mean, for most people, just going gluten-free is a 12-week learning curve. But you know, we all come and face these challenges where maybe we've gone gluten-free, we feel better, we're on the right track, and then we have a holiday blunder, and that's what I really want to talk about tonight. So one of the key things before we talk about how to detox, so stay with me, we are definitely going to be talking about detoxification from gluten, but it's learn the lesson if you did deviate. So again, a lot of people, what do we call, what's the difference between ignorance and stupidity? And the big difference is in education, right? Doing something out of ignorance is generally you didn't know better, right? Didn't know better, didn't know any better. Versus stupidity, which is you knew better, but you did it anyway. Now, everybody's stupid sometimes, including me. I'm not going to pretend that I don't make stupid mistakes. That being said, we want to be stupid a lot less, right? So, like, if we're saying, okay, would we prefer that we're stupid all the time? No. I mean, making mistakes out of ignorance from not knowing any better is one thing, but to self-select this, right, as a normal kind of contingent of our life choices, then you'd get what you deserve is the point. So if you did this over the holiday season, and again, I'm in good company if you did, because I've done this in the past. I don't do it anymore, but I've done this, right? And you knew better, and you paid a price. Learn the lesson. Right? Learn the lesson. Sometimes lessons are reinforced, through bad experiences. And I think that's important to understand, because many of you go through this gluten challenge, right? And there can be ample bad experiences. The bad experience of feeling unhealthy or feeling in poor health or becoming sick. And then the bad experience of getting sick once you've established better health as a result of diet change. Like, these are reinforcing experiences in life. So again, don't hover around this, right? And move away from this, because once you're watching this show, you no longer have the excuse of ignorance, because we talk about gluten plenty. And so all of you watching, unless you're just newbies, should know better. So now you have to saddle yourself with stupidity. And nobody, again, like I said, nobody wants to saddle themselves with the knowledge of repetitive stupidity. That's a recipe for disaster. So walk away better equipped. Learn the lesson and walk away better equipped to deal with it next time. So some of the strategies I talked about last week, which was navigating the holidays while trying to maintain your gluten-free diet. We talked about, calling ahead. If you were going and traveling and going to somebody else's house, calling ahead, bringing your own food, making sure that somebody didn't slave away on a kitchen to try to prepare food for you and then you just show up and say, no, I'm not going to eat it. Like, that's rude. But calling ahead of time and saying, I have a special dietary need, I can't expect you to follow through with that, with those expectations. That's common sense. That's good judgment, and that's respecting the other person and what they're trying to accomplish by hosting that holiday party. So again, walk away better equipped. Learn the lesson, and when you learn that lesson, so as you got sick and said, okay, not worth it, now take that lesson and plan for the next event. What are you going to do differently next time? How are you going to approach that next holiday party? Because look, we're at the cusp of parties, right? Thanksgiving is the beginning of the onslaught of the month of December Christmas parties, whether you host your own or you visit friends and family who host theirs, or you go to an office work party. Like, there's no shortage of opportunities, right, to repeat the mistake if you did cheat at Thanksgiving. And so what ends up happening for a lot of people, and I'm really clear here, is a lot of people end up 2 months out of their year, November and December, and really go back to even Halloween, because a lot of people cheat at Halloween. They're eating all the candy, right? So you got Halloween, and then you got the month of November, which is Thanksgiving. And so there's this 2-month period out of the year where you could arguably in your own head you could justify cheating, right? If you wanted to, if you really wanted to. Most people self-justify internally, and so that's 1/6 of your entire year, right? Which by percentage, if you were taking a 6-question test and you missed a question, you'd already be at a pretty poor grade. So think of that in terms of your year. Don't think of it in terms of, okay, I'm just going to cheat this month through these parties and then I'm going to make a New Year's resolution to do better. New Year's resolutions, in my opinion, are just you telling yourself you're going to continue to give yourself permission to damage yourself, so that at a certain date in the future, you'll stop that damage. It's basically saying I'm going to give myself permission to become unhealthy for the next 2 months. Most people spend their New Year's resolution trying to recoup their health from the damage they did over Thanksgiving and December parties, and then they never make it. And so every year they go backward just a little bit, right? Gain an extra 2 pounds this year, an extra pound the next year, an extra 2 pounds next year. And it's not that weight gain is actually the emphasis that I want to preach, but that's just an example of what we commonly see as people get older. They pack on weight. What does packing on weight actually mean? It doesn't, I'm not worried about the weight so much. It's the inflammation that comes with that added weight, because when you pack on weight, understand that is an inflammatory issue. So the more of that fat that you harbor, the more inflammation you're most likely harboring as a result of those choices. So learn from the mistake. Don't wait for the new year to plan. Plan right now. Like, get December. You've all got a calendar, and you've all probably got a list of parties that you've been invited to or that you may be planning on attending. So plan for these now. And what are you going to do to plan for that? Again, we mentioned call your family, right? Get a hold of them. Let them know what your dietary restrictions are if you haven't already, and make sure they're supporting you. Take your own recipe. Make your own food. Bring your own food. Pack your own food. Easy things that you can all do, right? And if you're eating out, like, plan that, call that restaurant. If there's a party at a restaurant, look at what that menu has to offer. See what's there. If you don't feel comfortable with eating it because you don't feel like you can get away without being hammered or cross-contaminated with gluten, eat before you go. And maybe when you go to the restaurant, do something different. Like, some people bring in an item, or some people just order, if you do alcohol, just order a glass of wine or something and still be social, but don't necessarily eat something where you're going to run into a problem, or where there's this massive potential for a problem. So again, plan that next event. And then, down here we've got supplementation. So how can you plan yourself? We talked about some of these things last time, but like, if you're traveling, you should be carrying Gluten Shield as an enzyme to help protect you from cross-contamination. In my opinion, if you're worried about gluten exposure and you're going to loosen up your diet a little bit, not on purpose eat gluten, but potentially run the risk of cross-contamination, this is number one and this is number two, because anytime you get gluten exposure, small amounts, this will help give you a degree of enzymatic support to break that gluten down. And then the body defense, we know gluten exposure causes a reduction in certain types of bacteria, right? Healthy bacteria, your microflora, and that's what this was designed for, was to kind of replenish those microbiota that we know gluten can damage and destroy. The third on my list here is something called immune shield, and what it does is it acts as surrogate handcuffs in your intestine to bind on to toxic elements that you might be exposed to so you can poop them out. So like these are kind of three that I highly recommend if you're traveling and you know you might be getting some exposure. But these are, I keep these in my backpack, right? These are my gluten travel kit, if you will, when I know I'm going to be maybe forced into a situation where I might have to eat OPF, other people's food, when I'm traveling to do lectures and things. Oftentimes I'll pack my own food. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.